It doesn't matter if you're shooting HDR, flambient, or even single exposure, there is one rule in real estate photography that can make your photos stand out while reducing your time in editing. This rule has been used by legendary photographers for decades, and it's used today by some of the highest end architectural photographers as well. So let's dig into this rule, let's see how it actually works, and then I'll show you examples of how you can apply it to your work as a real estate photographer. Ansel Adams called this rule pre-visualization. It was part of a larger principle known as the zone system. Now, you might be thinking, well, what does a landscape photographer from many decades ago shooting black and white have anything to do with real estate photography? Well, everything. Because this principle is exactly what separates high-end architectural photos from run-of-the-mill real estate listing photos. Ansel Adams applied this to his work, which made his photos stand out. Using digital photography today, it's more commonly called composite visualization, since today we can layer and blend images in editing software. Using this rule, Adams split his workflow into two parts: the external events, which is what's in front of the camera, and the internal events, which is the goal of the final image. Now, for real estate, the subject is different, like a kitchen or a living room, but the same rule and workflow applies. For Adams, this meant planning the time of day, using filters, and carefully dodging and burning in the darkroom. But today, we use compositing to achieve the same effect, but the key is capturing the right footage to make this happen, and this is where things get tricky. A big challenge that we face today that Ansel Adams really didn't have to deal with is, as real estate photographers, we're under time pressure most of the time, so we like to rely on formulaic settings and formulaic compositions. For instance, like just some preset brackets, a lot of auto mode if you're in a big hurry, and some generic flash pops and hope for the best later. But then we get back to editing or have someone else edit our photos and things don't always look the best. And that's because we didn't take an extra few seconds to just apply this rule of pre-visualization using the zone system. So now let's dig into some real-world results where pre-visualization with the zone system works very well in real estate photography. But before getting to that, I wanted to take just a real quick break and mention that if you did want to learn more about real estate photography, then I'd invite you to take a look at my courses on real estate photography. I've got courses that cover professional interiors, expert editing, exteriors, videography, business and marketing, and I've also written a series of books on real estate photography as well, and I have links to all of that down in the description for this video. So this is one of the final images that we're going to go through, but we're going to dig into the raw files that went into making each one of these examples. That way we can see what went into making everything to apply this rule of pre-visualization. So here in this finished image, this was a flambient shot. And if I take a look at the raw files, this is an ambient only shot. And this really isn't that bad. You can almost get by using this alone, but there obviously are some color problems, some blown out highlights, things like that. And you might be able to blend this with HDR. But using flambient, I used a different approach, very typical, so I can get those really sharp colors and really good contrast, and also control the lighting, because as you notice down here, it's a little dull, which is very typical when you have a lot of overhead lighting, but we really want to also showcase the floor. So typically, and you've probably seen me do this before, is that I do a two-sided flash composite. There's a key light near the camera, and then I'm going back and forth. Now you'll notice here, flashing this side here, which is then lighting the other side, I'm getting some shadows here, especially on the floor because of this island. This is a very common problem. And so I do a few different exposures for it. When I move to the other side, the same thing happens, but that's okay. I'm getting the color here that I want. And if I were just to use these by themselves, well, I'd be dealing with these shadows, and then the ambient light was a little on the dull side. So what I do then is, in the cases like this, is I do these other pops. And this is where pre-visualization comes in. I know that there were deep shadows here, so I'm going to be doing some flashing on both sides to highlight that flooring and also some of the other cabinets. That way I know that I can use these later in post-processing to make a more impactful image. And this is the key to pre-visualization. So instead of just popping off flashes like I do for a typical two-sided composite, I intentionally did other flash frames knowing how I'd use them later. This is something I do, by the way, for many kitchens like this next example. Here we are once again. This is the finished image of this kitchen island. And of course, I'm taking great care to get everything lined up as far as composing for it. But once again, if I do a two-sided flash composite, then I'm dealing with shadows down here. And if I were to try and use the ambient luminance out of this, or if you were doing HDR, when we take a look at the ambient shot, the shadows are even worse. And yes, that's natural, but when you're shooting, especially for architectural and design clients, they don't want to see this. They don't care about the realism. They want something that's going to help them sell them services based off what they've done. So yeah, they do want some shadow there possibly, but not that much. So after doing the two-sided composite, I'm once again doing these extra flash pops and then using like light and blending mode like I show in the expert editing course and also in the interiors course. Then you can then bring up those shadows naturally. And I usually do a few different exposures. You can see here that one was a little bit hot, so I just toned down a little bit. You can see my thumb is here on that speed light so that I can just turn that down as I need to on the go. But anyways, I do this for both sides, which now has become pretty much habit. But it's a matter first of looking, do I need to do this? It's a few extra seconds of pre-visualizing what's this image going to be at the end? How is this going to go together? And then, once again, using these various flash pops to have this final image. Here's another example. This is a very unique case. This is a finished image here in Lightroom Classic. And if we take a look at the ambient only shot, we can see that the ambient light did this no favors. So looking at this, we can see there's a lot of light coming in from a door that was over here. They don't have good overhead lights here in the kitchen. The under cabinet lighting isn't good, and this window isn't bringing in enough light. So this really isn't doing any favors. No matter how many brackets you put together with ambient shots, this really won't help. So the finished image here in this case is really almost entirely all flash. And what I did to do this is so that I could get more light here at the end of the room. If I just used flash here by the camera, you can see it's not really going to go in very far. But once I then start incorporating flash with that other one by the camera, you can see that I've got a lot more control of how much light is going to be there at the far end. Of course, then doing the two-sided composite, I've got enough footage then to bring this all together into this final image. The key though was that I saw that the ambient light here is going to do me no favors. So I'm pre-visualizing what the image should be at the end and then knowing, I want to put more light at the end. So I'm going to put myself in control of that with flash. This is one of the reasons why I really love to use flash. It's not just for correct colors and the sharpness. Yes, that's important. But also, when you control the light, you control the image. Something you've probably heard me say a lot on my Instagram page. But this example here, this is a different case where we can take advantage of some of the natural light, but then balance it with flash to a lesser degree. We're going to look at some more extreme cases where ambient light can almost be used entirely. But in a case like this, this is where you can rely almost entirely on ambient light, but with very little flash. Taking a look, for instance, at the ambient shot here, I can see I've got a lot of light at the far end here. I don't want to flash a lot there, but I can't rely on just one flash near the camera. I'm not getting good colors down through here. It's not going to turn out very well. So what I did was then, while keeping a key light near the camera, I went to the far room and I did this trick that Rich Baum used to call light on a stick. And that's where I'm holding the light stand so that it can go up here and flash off the ceiling here. But you'll notice here, as I do this for both sides to do my two-sided flash composite, it's actually darker still at the far end of the room than it is closer to the camera. And that's intentionally done so that when I add in just a little bit of this ambient luminance, then I get a more balanced image. Where yes, it is still brighter at the far end, but it's not overly bright, and that's because I used less flash power here at the end of the room. This case then takes, though, ambient light almost to the extreme. We're going to show all ambient here in a second. But this one here, the ambient light did work in our favor and was very well balanced. If I could get the correct colors out of this, then that's all I need. And so by using flash with this shot here, that's what I did. Now this is very flashy, but I've got correct color all the way through the frame. So all I had to do was just apply a little bit of that ambient luminance in there, and I've got this well-balanced photo. Now, of course, I erased some ambient luminance here off of the blinds, and then up here I did a darken mode window pull like I show in my courses, and you've probably seen on some of my older videos as well. Now let's take it to the extreme using no flash at all and just high-end HDR. Now, this is a concept image, but let's take a look at the original photo and the shots I took to create it. And that's what we have here. So this was the blended image. This was done using the high-end HDR technique that I show in my course on expert editing. So in there, you can see I'm taking different photos. Here's one where I've got a good middle exposure, but I really want to make sure that I also get enough up here on the ceiling. And just lifting shadows and whatnot, that's also not as natural. It's best if I intentionally, once again, shoot a shot for that, measuring what that exposure is. I can see it on the back of my camera and going, that's pretty bright where I needed it right up here. So I've got something I can blend into it. I also want to darken certain areas, and so typical out of an HDR bracket, here's my darker exposure, and I don't need the window pulls here. But I'm getting a lot of bloom, so one thing I'd like to do then is shoot an even lower exposure in case I need to blend this in. And the key here, once again, is that I'm shooting my footage intentionally, knowing what exposures I need. Instead of just firing off a bracket, even with this HDR, it took me just seconds to start from here and then get this final image with the proper footage, and then of course this concept image that I created then for the client. But the key here was intention for this rule of pre-visualization. And that's the premise here. If all you're doing is blindly shooting brackets, then you may not have enough footage to create a great photo. Each home, each room, and each space will be different. And that's why we use digital cameras, so that we can decide for any circumstance what settings to apply, where to emphasize lighter shadows, and other factors within our control, providing us footage that was captured for a reason, thinking with the end in mind, and knowing what tools we have at our disposal to make the final image come together.